So let me begin by welcoming all of you and also the audience, as they will keep coming in over the next few minutes, but I don't want to delay because there is a lot to talk. Let me start with a quick round of introduction, and let me sort of begin with the lady first. So Meghna Apparao. Meghna is a career leverite, spent probably couple of decades in levers before deciding to jump ship.
Ashok, I'm not even that old to spend a couple of decades.
I'm just trying to make you in line with the others in the panel. You know, otherwise somebody will say, "Ye bachchi ko kahan se utha ke lag gaya hai?"
It's a
So
good,
no, but
good
Meghna,
comeback, Ashok. Good comeback.
So Meghna, of course, brings in the reason I chose Meghna was I think she brings in very diverse experience. She worked in levers in a very classical brand building or brand development marketing kind of a role, and then after a brief stint with Godrej, moved to Amazon, where she actually helped set up a lot of FMCG categories, heading those categories and setting up the Amazon business. And then she moved from Amazon to actually a young, bright startup called Licious, where she actually went and probably did all those things which she swore she was trained to do in a very, very different way. And I just thought that the sheer diversity of the experience she brings in, it can be very enriching for today's discussion. So that's Meghna for you. The other two gentlemen actually do not need any introduction, but I will still do the honor. So Vikram, of course, as we all know, again brings in very diverse experience. Vikram spent a good part of his early career, I think about 12 odd years, with P&G and then Coke. So you can imagine Vikram also, getting his marketing training in a very classical brand marketing kind of a setup. And that to very iconic brands and companies like P&G and Coke. And then Vikram, of course, after a brief stint with the broadcaster, Star, actually moved to media. And we all have seen Vikram over the years heading Fulcrum and then Mindshare and then Groupon, and then going on to head Maxis Worldwide before, of course, wanting to come back and then becoming a part of Madison. So Vikram, of course, I think I always considered him as a very intellectual sort of a person. So I thought that Vikram would be a good guy with diverse experience to be able to add a lot of richness to today's discussion. And of course, the third and probably at the heart of today's controversial topic is Josie. Again, Josie, because we can't have a creative discussion without one of the most articulate persons as far as the creative space is concerned. Josie, I quite liked your brief, and so I'm going to do a bit of a reading for it because a few lines I really love. Which Josie, of course, as we all know, started David for Ogilvy many years back, and hence had experience of setting up an agency from scratch, where he is the first employee of the company, as he puts it. He also wrote that he started BBDO from the backseat of his car in 2008. That's a very interesting description. But I think the achievement which Josie and his team have achieved over the years have been really, really iconic. He's been considered as one of the most influential creative persons in advertising. He's won Creative Person of the Year award innumerable times from various agencies. He's been an IAA Creative Person of the Year in 2016. He's won this award multiple times from Campaign India and so on. But I think the real achievement of Josie, which I think everybody should be proud of, is the Cannes Lions, which he has been winning, I must say, consistently. He won the first one in 2015 for the Whisper campaign, and then followed it up by Cannes Lion Gold in 2015, 16, and 17 for Ariel. And so I think that's something which is really, I think everybody in the industry would be proud of. I quite like the last line. Josie writes that he was born during an earthquake, and he has a permanent tremor I would restate that as he was born during an earthquake, so he's born to shake up the world. So that's Josie for you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So just a quick administrative point to the audience. Whatever questions you may have, please put it in the chat box or the Q&A box, and I will take it up at the end. The plan is to really have this conversation for about 70-75 minutes and then have 15 odd minutes of questions. So my first question is going to be a common question to the three of you. I'll go in one by one, and that's really to just see where each one of you stand on the proposition, if I may say so. So let me start with Meghna again. Meghna, brand building in today's context is, as I said, is a very, very different ballgame altogether. And probably the most important visible element of brand building, which is really the communication and the power behind that communication, which is really all the creativity which goes with it, somehow seems to have lost its place. That's my hypothesis. I wanted to know your views. Do you agree with it? Or if so, yes. If yes, why? If not, why not?
So on this, Ashok, actually, like you said, I've seen the width of large organizations to a small startup and both ecosystems. So I definitely think the volume of advertising has gone up in terms of the number of brands who are able to advertise today, because you have cheaper access channels like digital medium. So to that extent, there's a huge volume of communication which has gone up. And as a result, obviously, you get something which are maybe subpar. But leaving out for that, I would say the need for fantastic creativity and really sharp, excellent, clutter-breaking, brand-building communication, there is, meaning this is the time for that. Yeah, because of the sheer volume of communication that is getting shown to us as consumers, the ability to stand out there in a very differentiated way, I think, is even more critical than before. And specifically, I want to add on my own experience in the digital medium, is that there may be a bunch of principles that people lay out, but the reality is that those principles keep changing all the time in what the framework of good needs to look like. Yeah. I think 5 years ago, there was no TikTok. 1.5 years ago, TikTok was a rage, and overnight it disappears and you need to transform yourself and talk in another medium. So I think the need for agility in adapting to various mediums and talk to the consumers in the manner that medium requires is another important dimension of creativity beyond the core storytelling also. So I don't think the importance of creativity or need for it has dropped. In fact, I think there's no time like now for all of this to be really stand out.
Vikram?
Okay. I promise not to sit on the fence on any of your questions. So I agree. I think the focus has shifted from the creativity, I think, has taken a little bit of a backseat. It needn't have, but it has. The focus has shifted from capturing the imagination of consumers to sell at any cost. And that's really happened with the advent of digital, because now we've moved to full funnel advertising. So suddenly ROI is now becoming very important. And you're able to see that, okay, what is my advertising as a cost of sales? ACoS is a new word that has come into our lexicon. And all of these is leading to sell at any cost. The effect, when I joined Procter, that time the brand teams wasn't even called brand teams, it was called advertising. And the only thing the brand managers did was actually develop advertising. They wouldn't go and, like Hindustan Lever style, go into the markets, work the markets, be responsible for sales. They were purely responsible for communication. So they were spending 100% of the time on that, and it became really an art. And the entire idea was to captivate a consumer and build trial and repeats on the back of the communication they create. So the focus on communication has decreased. Now, the reason why it shouldn't be so is, sure, it has increased, but the syntax of all the kind of new touch points that have come in is different. And now I think the opportunity is even greater. So I'll agree on that part with Meghna. I think there is an opportunity to actually seize the creative inherent in everything, whether it's a TV commercial, whether it's an Instagram post, whether it's a search ad, whether it's a radio commercial, anything, you can untap the creativity. But I don't think enough people have time, they're not focusing enough attention on it. It's right now all about sales. And if you actually look at the early days of the 90s, and people have often compared advertising in India to advertising in the US. In the US, advertising is all about sell, right? It's just hits you on the head. It's just sell. So I think right now, from capturing imagination, it is right now becoming sell. I think we need to maybe change the balance a little bit more.
Thank you, Vikram. Josie, your views?
Yeah, so I sort of echo what Meghna is saying. There's never been a better time actually for creativity, so many mediums to explore, so many formats, and so many new offerings from brands that are trying to be sensitive to consumer needs. And I think that's also reflecting in a lot of the work we're seeing. Like last year, I remember Cadbury's, the Not Just a Cadbury's ad was so inspiring, or work from Unilever or Facebook, the Pooja Didi ad, or you might say this is just a few, but I'm just naming a few. I mean, even the work we do for P&G, all of these really are not just amazing for India, they've been recognized worldwide as well. So it's not just as restricted to only the Indian space, and whether it's for effectiveness awards or for creative. So I think it's a fantastic time. And when you look at places where creativity is celebrated and you see all the work there, it's such you feel young again and you wish you were born again. And I don't know, I mean, I feel so excited about what's going on right now. So at no point have I felt that something is going away or something's not being done enough. But like Meghna said, because of the proliferation of channels and possibilities, maybe the volume has increased, and so we start seeing more of the crappy stuff. But the good stuff is truly brilliant, and that's what keeps us going. Yeah, that's what I feel. It's a fabulous time to be in the business, probably the best.
So Vikram, I'll jump to you because you just mentioned sale. Now, I was just going through today. In the papers there's an article about a 27th unicorn being born this year. Okay, it's $1 billion company, and I actually took the trouble of going through the first 26 to find out. A thing that struck me was that not one of them was an own brand. Okay, so in your view, what actually defines a coherent brand strategy? Because is it other than short-term eyeballs, customers, leads, and many of them are often driven by the need for valuation. I was intrigued to find out that most private equity investors who invest in large companies don't even do an equivalent of a brand due diligence, just as they do a commercial due diligence. So according to you, what actually construes a brand strategy in today's world?
A good brand strategy to me paints a picture of how to get consumers to buy my brand more times and at a higher price. That is what marketing is. That's what brand management is all got to be, to get more people to use you, to buy you. I'm underlining the word buy. In a startup world, the word buy has been forgotten. So now people are saying that let's just acquire more consumers at any cost, and at a premium to chodo, even the people are not buying you to actually get acquiring the customers. Now, if that is a case that happens, the brand strategy doesn't lead to one of the commitment towards a brand really doesn't come in. When I got into Coke, there was this lovely guy called Yanni Hofmeier. He has this thing called conversion model. And he actually at that point in time was actually looking at why in South Africa, why is it that people from those African tribes are moving to Christianity? So something as deep as religion, why were people converting? And then he came out with certain factors and said, so he came out with a conversion model. There is so how committed are you to a particular brand? Today, my belief is that because you're not having a very coherent brand approach or brand proposition, and you're not capturing the imagination of the consumers, whatever you are acquiring is on a very, very feeble foundation. So today, the unicorns that are being built out, some of them actually, you could actually argue and wonder whether they will actually withstand the whatever the going concern principle. I mean, for whatever reasons, like a WeWork is no longer there. And like that, we have a few more which are a little endangered. So I would like to say that the fundamentals of getting consumers to buy into your brand emotionally and with your wallet, I think that has been shortchanged. That's what's lacking in brand strategy today.
Picking that from there, Meghna, now you cut your teeth in a very classical approach, brand vision, brand key, get the positioning right, get the segmentation right, build a brand personality, and so on and so forth. Now, in the absence of these, if unicorns can actually be built, do you really think that these things are losing relevance, and can we actually create memorable creatives without all these things, all these rigorous steps?
So just like Vikram, I want to take a very strong position on this one, which is I think it 100% has to be there. Whether you spend 1 year of time, tons of commission market research and lots of money, or do you as a founder, if it's a small startup, have a very clear vision of what you want your brand to manifest itself at? Yeah, which process you follow is less important, but having that at the core and building from there and then doing it absolutely consistently is really the only way to achieve the outcome that Vikram said, which is sales. Because end of the day, we are as business folks building brands to get consumers to buy, which becomes sales. Now, to be able to do that, if you don't do it consistently, your brand will 100% get lost in the clutter. And I think the good brand examples that we see have been able to nurture a certain core at the start and just keep building on it versus a schizophrenic way of going and doing all kinds of things. Unfortunately, we have a lot of examples of the second one. And for me, my pet peeve is if you really want to show some kind of a bump up, you pick a celebrity and you go on IPL. That seems to be one magic mantra. And unfortunately, the set of celebrities you pick also comes from the same pool. So by the end of it, you're sitting and wondering like, which ad, which brand, what did I just see, right? Or with some other brands, you watch the ad is fantastically memorable. All of us are talking about it on social media handles, but you ask them, what does that brand do? And you don't have an answer. Or you ask, what was that ad for? And you don't have an answer. So all of these things, I think marketers have been knocked on the head, saying your job end of the day is to build branded memorability, which translates into sale. And to do all of that, this core work of brand vision, brand key, what is your brand persona, must be an absolute core truth. So for example, when I started out at Licious, I kid you not, the very first few months, that's the first task that we set out to do. Thankfully, we had a very good foundation, but we said that's our first starting point. We'll build on that, and then we'll go out and do something. I'll just give a short example. Is we wanted a certain persona of our brand because it's a meat in-home cooking brand. We said it has to be something which has that touch of not being perfect. That's the sense you want to create. And if we said if that is our brand, and tomorrow who is the set of people that we'll bring alive, and we pick this combo of Arjun Kapoor and Anil Kapoor for starters, where they were cooking up at home, which to us was a great fit. And we saw some fantastic outcomes in terms of branded impact. So I would strongly recommend that is the first principle mantra that brands should use to be able to do it consistently and in the medium and long term get their ROI.
So thanks, Meghna. So I think that kind of nicely sets up my next question, which was Josie, which is a lot of companies today don't have these. They don't go through these, and I know of quite a few successful brands who don't even know what to write, and they don't even have a brand manager. They only have a digital team which keeps releasing ads and so on and so forth. Now, that's on one side, that you don't get the right thinking or conceptual inputs. You also are facing a lot of pressures from the mediums. So you have the pressure from the YouTube, where if you need to increase your click-through rate, you need to be relevant in the first 5 seconds. Twitter has its own pressure. Instagram brings in its own pressure. So there is a lot of change in the mediums itself. There was a time when the core was television commercial, and then adaptation to an outdoor, adaptation to a cinema, adaptation to a print used to happen a lot more easily. Today, all that doesn't exist. In the absence of all this, what has all this done in terms of pressure on the creative team, in the way they think and in the way they express themselves, and how do they actually still generate great creatives, if at all they can?
Of course they can, and we're seeing a lot of that. But just before that, I must say that we're getting a lot of startups coming to us saying, can you build us a brand? They're all very successful in the way they're pushing themselves through, digital performance or performance marketing. But somewhere they feel that they're losing meaning or relevance, and they come to us seeking emotional relevance or some sort of larger meaning. And we find that very, it's the other way around. Normally, you'd say, let's start with meaning and then move into pushing your products. But so we are seeing that as well. And we have at least 4 clients like that who come to us. So that's, and sometimes they even use the word find us a purpose. So that means that they're realizing that you need both the push and the pull. The other point about mediums is that, see, mediums are new. We guys were exploring Facebook and its possibilities in 2009 when we did a campaign called Women Against Lazy Stubble. And so people had already moved into Facebook in a big way. So that, and even a dinosaur like me found it easy to work on that. And then moving forward, YouTube, I think, again, people have done amazing work through YouTube and build brands, not build brands using YouTube, but at least created enough resonance using YouTube. It's Insta and Twitter that people will now have to sort of understand how to use that better. And we're seeing early sort of examples across the world and in India. And of course, one of the best examples of Twitter use across the world was Nike's Colin Kaepernick, right? It all started with one tweet. So that every medium has its own sort of strengths. And what was wonderful, one of my clients said, listen, you play football, do you understand football? Do you know that football comes with templates? Because there's, the field and there's the way you move. And yet within that template and within that constraint, there is Maradona and there is Messi and there's Pele and all these great players. So look, maybe there are constraints, but you've got to find your sort of creative new thing in it. And that's what people are doing right now. So these are actually, it's exciting us to do new things. You're saying, hey, we don't want to follow a pattern. Someone saying, give me a 2-second provocative start and then give me a UI and then put something. You're saying, no, maybe there's a new way to do it. So it's early days of experimenting, like any new medium. When TV came, people were putting print on TV. So and then you evolve, right? You understand the personalization. So it's that interesting zone at this point. It's too early to say anything is in or out. The wheel is still in spin and you don't know where it's going to stop. So it's exciting.
Ashok, if I can just add one more thing. I just building off what Josie said, this is also an ecosystem that has to come alive. So while you look towards small brands, startups, up and coming stars, right? Because they're trying to find their way. End of the day, they work with creative agencies like Josie, folks like Josie themselves. We work with media partners like Vikram and their teams. So I think it's a bit about the ecosystem coming together and challenging and pushing that thought. Yeah, so you can actually get to a fantastic outcome. And Vikram here, this is the plug-in on thank you to you. So myself and Vikram, we worked together on Licious. And as we were creating this specific campaign, when we were having a conversation with Vikram and team, they actually suggested something, saying, guys, you have 90 minutes delivery. It's a fantastic promise. Why are you not putting it on your main creative? We think it's going to be a needle mover for you. We had it as, let's call it an edit version. But that conversation challenged us to think differently and actually bring it back into the brand ethos. So I think this partner ecosystem of not just the brand team alone, but the respective creative agencies, partners together coming together, right? And I think, Ashok, that's the difference between traditional large companies where everything is somewhat formulaic, things are there, this is how we need to do it. But like Josie mentioned, in some other place, it's very exciting because you can create all of that, and all of us have the flexibility to contribute into creating this magic. So I think the pushback, that debate is important from all parties involved in creating this.
Ashok, if I may add to this
Sure.
point, I think there's some introspection that we agencies need to do, because it's clear right now that every platform or medium has its own syntax. So, but we need to master it. Now, I don't know whether, that I'll start off with the one which creative agencies used to be sort of, it was their, people used to whip them for that, which is print died because creative guys only used to love making films. So they whenever brief would come in, they would only take the sort of brief in a 30-second format, and they'd come out with fantastic creative on a TV commercial. And then the other sort of skills around print sort of started declining. And we've seen some of that. When radio FM started, we used to get sound edits of TV commercials and expect them to sort of work for FM radio. And then it actually took the FM radio industry to actually hire talent from agencies, and for the cost of a media plan, give absolutely brilliant creative that works on that FM platform, and then FM actually boomed. The point I'm trying to make is that we as agencies need to really put in a fair amount of effort in mastering the syntax of a particular format. So Josie talked about the entire Facebook piece, and that because, most of us, Facebook we use as consumers, and say therefore it became easier. But like that, I don't think enough effort is being put in to create magic for every, like whether it's Instagram or Twitter or whatever of those. So I think we need to be putting in much more resources. And while TV commercial, because of film was a sexy and glamorous part, the other parts also are not very well paying, because the production of radio ad is what, 30,000 rupees. So therefore it's not very remunerative. From a business standpoint, a tweet costs even less. But I think that's where we guys missed the point. We really need to introspect in building those skills. Related point to that is that, especially on the digital side, there's a fair amount of machine learning which is actually taking over the creative process. So you actually, the entire bit about put your celebrity in the first 5 seconds, put your brand name in the first 6 seconds, all that is coming from some kind of machine thing. All this is good, useful, but we should also take a lesson from it. Like in the 80s and 90s, Bollywood films were called formula films because you knew that there would be two brothers, they would get separated, something would happen, and finally they would meet in the end, and there would be some kind of redemptions and all that. Now that became a formula. Now the minute creative becomes a formula, then that I think is a watch out. So yes, use machine learning, but like I think I'm taking from Josie's thing, like you have the entire playbook or the template of a football game, but then you have to have the Messis and the Ronaldos doing their genius things inside that template. So that I think is a big call out. I'm just reiterating the point that Josie made. Don't make it a formula.
Tell me, Vikram, how important is budgets? Now we see the smaller ones justifying it, performance marketing by saying, we are a small company and hence we need to drive footfalls, eyeballs, lead generation, whatever. But then even very large companies, very large brands, which are literally blowing away crores and crores of money, we don't see great advertising from them. And as Meghna was saying at the beginning, all you see is, they put a logo on a cricketer's t-shirt and blow money on IPL and think they've arrived. So how important is the budgets and then channelizing of the budgets to help with the creative process?
I would like to believe that budget in and of itself it should not be linked to the creativity. So, and if you could have mega budgets and still come out with a very, very creative and a fantastically brand building sort of communication. And even if you'd have very meager budgets, you can do the same. So it should actually be reasonably agnostic. However, you have got, what I've seen is, yes, if I have to be practical about it and look at empirical data, sometimes when you've got bigger budgets, there is some amount of lazy marketing, and therefore you might sort of lose out. And I found that entrepreneurs, especially when it's their own money, they go much more they walk that extra mile to make sure that the thinking process is there, the creative process is being followed. So maybe in practical terms, bigger budgets is leading to a little bit more lazy marketing, but it definitely is not it doesn't follow. Shouldn't be, and budget shouldn't be a sort of link to creativity.
Shifting gears, Josie, we've seen recently a few creatives, from brands like Surf and Titan and so on, where they bring in a lot of religion, just to create, some kind of hook or controversy and so on and so forth. Where is this pressure coming from? Is this coming from excessive clutter and competition? Or certainly, when a brand manager writes a advertising positioning statement or on the brief, they don't mention this. This is obviously born out of some, creative idea. Where is this pressure coming from?
I must say that in the late 90s, I did have a gentleman from Unilever who asked me to create controversy, and we did. But that's another story. But I think somewhere around 2008 or so, because of the rise of social media, there was the need for brands to be part of conversation. So not controversy, but conversation, because conversation creates sentiment, and sentiment creates desirability. So people are trying to get to be part of the conversation. Otherwise, if you're not part of the conversation, you don't exist. Visibility is conversation. And I think people are trying to find hooks or contexts that allow them that conversation. And sometimes in the process, you might just cross the line. And that's when it becomes controversial. So I think what brands are seeking is conversation, not controversy.
But how do the creative teams view this? Do they consciously try to give ideas which get into conversation?
It's a very mature process, to be honest with you, because I do find people wanting to kind of grab the limelight through conversation, but getting into things that may not feel real or may not feel truly sort of moving the world forward. It just feels like you're doing it for the sake of doing it. So you can get into dangerous zones if you're not careful. To be part of the conversation doesn't mean that that you have to be pushing. You got to be fighting conflicts or looking at things that are on the edge. Conversation can be very simple things. So when we did Share the Load, I mean, it's not controversial. It's really what's happening in people's lives. So there are a lot of things that are not being discussed, and we call them, and like we see ourselves as emotional archaeologists. We're trying to get to those places that are hidden, that people are not talking about, and that creates very positive conversation. But controversy is not what brands want, and it doesn't build brands. So we know that. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Ashok, if I can just build on that, even I don't think brands want to create controversies. The social media fallout that has happened is a huge rise of social activism. So today, the most innocuous of ads out there, you got just about some guy anywhere has just picked up something and sort of made a big controversy over it, and where there was it wasn't even a remote intention. So these days, the most innocuous of communications can be twisted, and I think social activism is a huge evil, because at one level, it's taken to a right level, it's good, but when it's taken to the absurd level that we often see, it's very, very damaging. So I think a large part of the controversies are coming from social activism rather than a desire to create controversy.
Meghna, you wanted to add something?
Yes, Ashok. So I think Josie said it beautifully, that we are looking for conversation. So people are talking about us, not actually controversy. And unfortunately, controversy leads to a lot more conversation, for sure. But I think there are two learnings which I've had. The first is, as soon as you're trying to be a part of social conversations, for sure, I think Josie again alluded to it. There will be times when somebody misreads your intent, or you may mistakenly step a line. It is going to happen. Yeah. And social activists like Vikram say are all prevalent. So I think it's super important for the brand to build brand trust with the consumer through everything they do. So it is like your foundation for failure in the future and significant and successful recovery. So if you build a great brand ethos with the consumer, they trust you, they believe in you. If you make one of these mistakes, which by the way, I would say is 100% going to happen. Only the degree is different and how often it happens, but it will happen. They will then forgive you when you say sorry, because it was not your intent. And there is this beautiful chart, Ashok, which I've seen, that when a customer or consumer is impacted negatively and you are able to come back to them with a response which they feel good about, your loyalty, retention, and engagement of that consumer is far higher than a consumer who has no controversy or no negative experience at all. That doesn't mean we should go seek these experiences, but that is the reality of how you can even take a so-called negative moment for the brand and make it positive by how you react to it. But all of that has to come back from building that foundation over time. So I think that's one thing that all of us as brands have to consistently invest in to prevent that rainy day attack that is kind of going to happen. And I think the second point, and that's true for both brand builders as well as creative folks, etc. I think we should be very sensitive to the topics and how our consumers read them. And that will help us stay away from more controversial kind of topics, because it's in the context of your brand, etc. So that very first principle, understand your consumers, I think it's very important to be quite true to that.
You know, that brings me to the next question, and I really want both you and Vikram also to comment on this one. Now, you've seen a brand and you've seen a channel, yeah, now, and you worked on both. Very similar to what we've seen in media, where the content versus pipe fight. The pipe is defined as a cable TV or a YouTube or even a Facebook. Now, do you think in this tussle, obviously, the brand would like the recall by its brand name, which is driven by creative communication and so on, whereas the channel would love people to come to the channel and almost like to commodify the category itself. In this, do you think this channel versus brand kind of a tussle which is going on is hurting creativity? And if so, and the second part of the question is, do you think that is creating headwinds for people like Josie to be actually be able to put out great creative output?
See, I think the channel does its job of giving you frameworks or how-tos or do it this way or that way, right?
Oh, but they also love to commodify the category.
Yeah, so I think it's going back to the very first question where we started, right? I think the positive glass half full version of the way at least I look at the world is to embrace that and see how can you be creative within that context. Because as a brand, you 100% don't want to be commodified. Nothing is going to work for you. And in a manner, it's also about us working with the channel in the right manner, because the channel can only win if we as brands win. If we as brands don't win, generate sales, turn around revenue, etc., how will the investment even go back? But I agree that that tussle does exist.
Vikram, what do you think?
I'm not sure I fully understood your question, because if you're talking about...
By channel, I meant actually the Flipkarts and Amazons of the world.
No, so if you're saying that every platform on which we can advertise has its standards and procedures that you have to comply with in order to advertise on that platform, is that...
No, actually, no, the channels actually want every brand to be seen as a commodity so that people come to the channel and then choose what they want. Whereas the brand would like to actually be seen as who they are. Very similar to the tussle we see in between content and pipe in media.
Yeah, so I got a question, but I'll link it back, I think, again to the S&P which each platform puts. So when you go into, say, an Amazon site, when you want to display your products right up there, there's a certain format which they allow you to sort of advertise in. So that sort of takes away the difference across brands and makes it look similar. So it's like a show window. Same thing if you go to Facebook, they have certain kind of norms for what should be the image to text and what can be an image and text and so on and so forth. And likewise in TV also there was a certain guidelines on what you can and cannot advertise and so on and so forth. I think the way to view it is within that S&P that each platform is putting down for you, how can you be the most creative and how can you get your message out? I mean, at one level, search ads was probably the most formatized. I mean, so it was the most formatted, commoditized kind of thing if you just go to Google search. But if you go to certain text ads and if you add, there are various ways in which you can add it, put extensions and even write the copy of your text ads, which actually can make the click-through much better. So it is possible to work within the confines of the rules laid down by these platforms. That again goes back to understanding the syntax. So yes, I can understand why platforms are trying to set those rules, but you can work within them.
Josie, do you agree?
Actually, I don't know too much about this. Yeah, I didn't fully understand. So I'll just skip this.
No, it's really, you know, the channels like you know, a Flipkart or an Amazon and so on would like your brand to be, you know, within the realms of a commodity, so that their brand is what a consumer goes to pick, you know, whatever he or she wants.
Yeah.
Whereas you as a brand wants to stand out in the clutter and be recalled by name and picked up from. And that's what the creative communication does actually for you. So in this tussle, do you think this tussle actually does provide create, you know, opposition or and come in the way of you being able to put out great creative work?
No, I mean, I don't think I understand it fully yet. You're very clear in the way you're saying it. But I mean, for me, it is show me the medium and I'll see if I can break it. You know, that's how I would look at it. So that there's nothing more I can say other than that. If you say this is all you have, and I want our product to stand out and have some clear definition or identity, then I believe we can do it. So yeah. So I in this context, I don't know what exactly is that medium.
Okay.
Is it the space on the site or what?
So Josie, moving on, let's talk about, oops, I think Meghna dropped out. She'll come back, but I'll anyway continue with my question for you.
Sure.
How challenging it is in today's context in attracting and retaining a good creative talent, and I'm contextualizing it in the sense that you know, there was a time when agency people used to give an arm and a leg to be on brands which spends lots of money and makes fantastic commercials and so on and so forth. And today all that has become kind of fuzzy. That's one. Second, there are a lot of attractive avenues for expression. You know, whether and we know there's so many successful advertising creative people who've gone on to make full-fledged movies and very successfully so. And with the OTT platform exploding the way it is, avenues for creative expression is only going up for them. In this era, how easy or how and you know, the challenges as we just discussed in putting together creative output is complex and becoming fuzzy. In this environment, how easy or difficult it is to get good creative talent, retain good creative talent, and so on?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It is getting increasingly difficult. And one of the things that I try to do is I try to catch them young, because at that point, there's so much passion and love for advertising, because they see the face of it and they enjoy what they've seen. So I find that getting young people who have the energy, enthusiasm is possibly the best way, because as you get older in the business, you feel, I sense disillusion, and therefore there's the energy drops. And then again, after a certain age, again, it rises again. So for me, it's the entrance level that creates magic. And in today's world where your media is fresh and exciting, these young people are really innovating and creating new things for the medium. And with experience and their sort of relevance to the medium, we are finding more exciting things happening. But no longer people waiting at the door, no longer people sending and writing to us saying, we want to join you. When I was in David, it was a small agency, but I had, in a year, I would have 1,000 people writing to me saying, we want to join David because of the ideology and all of that. Today, you don't have that. I mean, and we're a big agency, but we don't have people waiting at the door. And when I asked the headhunters and consultants about it, they say that people are just looking for the next new thing, and they have words in their heads, and they want to say we did that. They're not just looking at ad agencies or OTT. They're looking for, hey, can I do this performance marketing thing? Can I do digital advertising? Can I get some measurement devices that I can talk about? So it's a different, slightly scattered world right now for us. And only the truly passionate are coming.
So you think that's hindering the creative process?
No, not at all. The beauty of creativity is that it works only in constraints. If there are no constraints, there's no creativity. So actually it's increasing it. It's making the few far greater, I feel. It's amazing to see that. I always thought that, oh shit, we're not getting enough people, even though we'd like to believe our work is recognized, but not enough. And yet those who are there are going for it. So it's quite interesting.
That's good to hear that less is more. Even you have less, you are still able to put greater work and better work.
Yeah.
Vikram, I'm moving the needle to this whole issue of accountability. You mentioned in passing right at the beginning. Now you, when I say you, I mean the agencies. You sit on money allocation and how much cash should be burned by which brand on which medium and so on and so forth. How important is accountability in today's context? And I'm asking this question because one of the things which people, the advocates of performance marketing and digital marketing push very aggressively is that, there is accountability of the money spent. And that's something which they really value and fancy. Whereas we know that in money spent in traditional medium or even in large sums of money spent in, impact advertising, as we discussed earlier, is often, money spent, but we don't know whether we got the bang for the buck. So in that context, how important is accountability and the fact that digital marketing or performance marketing is far more measurable compared to traditional? And is that a reason, one of the reasons why people are wanting to put less and less money in the traditional way of brand building?
No, so I think accountability is important. Return on investment is something that has always been, it's not a new word. It was even asked in the 90s. However, these days in 2021, it's being asked a little bit more. And that's precisely because we have got the ability to measure at least the digital part a whole lot better. And even the traditional analog part lends itself to some amount of measurement. So, I mean, we've embraced a planning philosophy called outcomes planning. We believe that end of day, whether it's awareness or consideration or the final trial piece, whatever we are doing, we should be able to measure some of that. So I believe metrics are in place and it can be done. It can be done at all stages. It can be done for a TV commercial that you're showing, whether it's on TV or whether it's on YouTube, that's irrelevant, but you can actually put it out there and see what has it done to lift my awareness. You can also see what is done to lift my entire purchase intent. You can then after that find number of ways in which you can actually drive stickiness. Are people really going to my piece of content and spending time with it? Is it actually leading to people actually going and searching more? Is it leading to some downloads? So all those kind of actions which are now happening, there are also offline, online kind of transactions that can be. So if we put out an ad, it is now actually possible to Because typically, you know that when you take an ad, put an ad on TV, people will start searching on their mobile phones almost immediately. So you are able to say that by putting out this ad, it actually generated this kind of search or this kind of visits to my websites, and all those things can be measured. So I think the entire attribution to media and what it's doing is improving as we speak, and I think that's good. So I think it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll only move all the money downstream into performance marketing. I think typically when the startups, when they come in, they start bottom of the funnel because that's where the low-hanging fruit are, the people who are showing intent and interest in the category. You can mop them up by actually going and doing performance marketing and actually taking them up. But beyond a certain point, when that saturates or matures, you have to sort of lift the game into a much larger kind of high reach, high awareness platform. And that's where the TV and the other mass media also start playing a role. So I think everybody has a role to play and it can be measured. So I think accountability is important.
Ashok, I want to come in here.
Yeah, I'm going to actually ask you this question with a slightly different twist, which is, Meghna, you've seen brands where, traditional advertising is measured, using very classical Millward Brown kind of researchers and so on. And you've also seen, startups, burning cash because, investor wants you to burn cash. I'm putting it in a sort of slightly lighter vein. How important is accountability according to you, especially in those companies where, they want to show some quick results?
Sure. So to set the record straight, no investor wants you to burn cash. The investor wants you to get revenue. If burning cash gets you revenue, that's why they want you to do it.
I'm actually, Meghna, I'm actually quoting a marketing head of a so-called unicorn. When I went and asked him this question about accountability, he actually told me, boss, don't ask me that's like shooting in my foot. I have to spend this money in a certain period of time.
I'm very concerned for that unicorn. Let's start from now. So I think that, Ashok, the first thing I think and I'm going to oversimplify this, and in the same lighter vein, what is performance marketing? What is brand marketing? What is TV marketing, media marketing? Everywhere the consumer is getting exposed to a piece of communication. More often than not, if it's a video ad, the video ad can be showcased as performance, as brand, or on TV. So I think the first and most important is understanding your consumer insight, getting your brand tone and personality right, and consistently doing that in an effective manner. It doesn't take away from where this money gets spent and how it gets spent. This thing cannot get compromised. Yeah. So I think as creative folks, advertising, etc., right, I would say just focus on that. The deployment piece is where and how you're spending the money, right? But the medium doesn't change in that manner. You can go to YouTube and do performance marketing. You can go to YouTube and do brand marketing. It's just the way you classify your campaign on whether you're measuring it on top of the funnel metric or bottom of the funnel. But I would want everyone in the audience and listening in to say that the first principles of great creative do not change one bit. So that's, I think, the very, very first thing. The second piece I want to add is on how we look at this accountability. And I'm the kind of person that I grew up in this ecosystem where you would wait for 1 month with, sitting at the edge of your seat, wondering what the data is going to say, whether your numbers moved up or down on brand metrics. To today, when you can go onto your app dashboard literally on an hourly basis and check and see where things are happening, right? But I think there has to be a big caution in terms of using this data effectively to find the right patterns. It's not everybody's cup of tea. Neither should we take knee-jerk reactions and decisions on brands which are being built over time, over a long period. Yeah, there's a huge risk of fooled by randomness. So if you say I turned on the TV, but my searches have not gone up and hence something's wrong with the campaign. And really, is that the way we want to judge a long-term asset for our brand? So I think that's a very big watch out. What data, how do you look at it in the right manner and effectively? I think that skill set only is lacking. And all of us across levels, across whichever work stream we belong to, have to learn that art and science together. That's, I think, the second piece. And the third and the final piece to this thing is, end of the day, the brand you're going to build or the category that you're going to create. Nobody's sitting there waiting for that, right? As a consumer, we are not waiting to buy brands today, tomorrow, or day after and change our lives and lifestyles in an instant. So we should not expect instantaneous outcomes. We should be very clear on these things are building for time. When I say time, it's not an indefinite measure, right? But at the same time, we should be patient. We should hold each other accountable to say, you know what, this is about brand building. The consumer will see the ad over 3 times or 4 times, they will warm up to it, and then they will come up and buy it. They're not going to just see it and leave everything that they're doing and go buy your brand, right? That's not why a consumer is sitting and waiting around. So I think as long as we're confident that we're doing the right thing and the needles start moving in the right direction, that is the metric that we should look for. Because I worry on knee-jerk reactions that you may put up a big campaign, blast it out, and 2 weeks later say, you know what, this is not working, let me go do something else. I don't think that works either for a creative person who's put, you know, sweat and toil into creating that asset, to the brand marketer who's invested time and effort in creating it. So I think patience to be able to believe that we are building brands for the long term, you know, for the next 50 years or 100 years. So let's also look at those metrics of accountability with that lens as pointers. But end of the day, marketing and creativity is an art more than a science. Yeah. So when our gut tells us this is the right thing to do, even if the needle is not moving as fast enough, I think staying the course is also something very important.
Thanks, Meghna. Josie, you know, not too long ago, certainly when I was a brand manager, there used to be a huge amount of excitement on the day when the commercial is finally sort of made, and suddenly you find that instead of 2 people, some 20 people land up in office. There are big Bose speakers being brought in, beta players are being brought in, and you know, a huge excitement is created just to showcase a 30-second commercial. Cut to today, when you know the way the commercial is going to be consumed. The instrument is different. It could be your iPad, it could be your phone, it could be your TV, or it could be a Mac or a laptop. The time when the content is getting consumed is changed. Everything is changed. So software elements, you know, which of creating a great communication, you know, whether it's the sound, whether it's the light, whether it's the visuals. You know, high density 4K viewing, you know, what's happened to all of that? And I really want to understand from you as a creative person, how have the fraternity actually coping with this? Because this used to give them such a big high. And
that was, yeah, I mean, it was amazing, right? The whole thing was like a theater. And in the last 16, 18 months, we've been doing it all, you know, on Zoom or whatever else, Teams, and presenting it like normal people view it. So yeah, things have changed. And I think therefore, even more the reason to find that deep connection that allows people to say, this is for me, or I like this brand, you know, I want to follow these guys. So, and I find the nature of creativity also changing. And I keep saying now, when I started, creativity for me was about connections, taking 2 things that were unconnected and connecting it. And people say, hey, that's interesting. I like that. Never thought of it that way. While these days, because of the changing medium, I find creativity is sort of sensitivity in a world where no one is listening. You know, if you can just be a little more sensitive to things, then that gains you attention and that gains you sort of connection. And I think that is probably one way that we're trying to sort this new world. Where we don't have the theatrics, but we still have the meaning.
Vikram, what is your view? You've been on both sides. You've seen all those. You've been in Coke. I mean, you have global campaigns being unrolled, and all eagerly waiting for those campaigns to come to your home country.
I don't think I can add much more to what Josie said, and he always says it so eloquently. It was that was a time and a place, and the theater felt good there. But frankly, right now in media, I'm not really sitting and watching the unveiling of creatives that much. So, but having said that, I think it's not too bad also seeing it in this, how a common man would see it. So in fact, probably it would be a good idea. In the old days, we always used to see the 60-second commercial and then the 40-second edit and then the 30 and then the 20. And the reality today is the media plan, bulk of the people are only going to see the 20. So it won't be a bad idea when you're evaluating your copy to start with the 20. So, and then maybe see the other ones and say for all the 5 people who see the 60, this is what it look like. And that I think has actually got some meaning to it if you do it that way. But yes, of course, it's nice to have the theater and drama, but I guess it's okay. If the way it's happening right now, I think that's the way of the times. And I don't think we lose out that much by evaluating on that basis, because that's finally how the consumer is going to view it.
Tell me, Meghna, there is now a new trend which is emerging, which is really D2C brands, which have been sort of reasonably successful, now wanting to go into the traditional brick and mortar space. Your own ex-company, Amazon, has set up brick and mortar shops. But more importantly, there are a number of reasonably successful D2C brands now wanting to actually set up regular brick and mortar outlets. How do you react to this? Do you think it's a good development, especially from an angle of creative process? Because the moment you set up a brick and mortar, you go back to what Vikram said earlier, which is you need to actually generate demand. And for generating demand, you need to actually catch hold of the consumer's attention. You need to actually communicate who you are and what you stand for, and then hope that the consumer actually buys. So it's no longer pushing it down into the consumer's household. So how do you see that change, and what do you think is it good for the whole process of traditional classical marketing and for the creative process?
If I step back, the first principle I would say, Ashok, is any meaningful brand has to be wherever the consumer is. Yeah. And D2C brands started out as D2C, not Amazon, but the smaller brands which exist and are definitely zipped and zapped in the past during the pandemic for sure. These brands began in an online kind of an environment because that was the easiest way to access their consumers at lowest cost from an efficient perspective because of who their TG was. Given a choice, maybe that may or may not have been their choice. But once you've done that, you want to be in all the consumer touch points. So why would you not do it is the question I would ask. And I really like this term called phygital, which is you want a physical presence and a digital presence because your consumers are seeing both. Yeah. Now I'm taking a punt on the future and we'll catch up, 5 years later and see how it pans out. Is the physical store, I think, is going to play a significant role on brand building. I think it may play even a lesser role on things like sales, especially in high price categories, etc. But to me, the physical presence in the store, either standalone or in a big multi-brand outlet, etc., has to create that brand experience for us. Because Ashok, going back to one of your earlier questions, you were saying that's very formulaic. When you sell on an e-commerce channel, you're constrained by many things you can do. The physical presence of your brand is a fantastic opportunity to bring alive the entire ethos of what your brand stands for. So again, I would embrace it as an amazing opportunity to be able to think of it not just as a sales and revenue channel, but really with the objective of creating brand experience. And I think the creative challenge for us as marketers to work with creative folks is to envision what that is going to be like. Yeah, so there may be a few examples today. Go to an Apple store. An Apple store in New York is a place where people want to go and visit, right? But that's one example that I'm quoting. How can we create that kind of an experience for every brand, even in, say, a small pop-up kind of an environment? So I think it's an opportunity for us to do some brilliant brand building, advertising, and creatives.
Also, just building on that, God is virtual, right? I mean, but there you need monuments where you want to go and worship. So you need to touch the virtual.
Ashok, we should begin with Josie for every question because he says it so beautifully.
That's why he's a creative. He's a creative.
Just provoked by what you'll say.
Vikram, views?
No,
about this
I
whole
think,
digital thing?
I think the part which is actually pretty fascinating for me is there are some huge brands which have the ambition of saying that D2C is not only going to be basically a online thing. They really want to own 100%, or they want to maximize the sales which they control directly. So I think Nike has this global strategy called incrementalism, where they are trying to drive more and more sales, whether through their own, whatever be their own platforms, whether it's the Nike store or whether it is going to be their D2C. They're going to be hopefully trying to reduce the stuff coming from the platforms or multi-brand outlets and stuff like that. And they will recognize that some of them will be still required, but they are the broader point is that the Nike experience and therefore the sales, the maximum amount that we can control ourselves, that is what we want to drive. Now, if indeed Nike's strategy is that, I think that's it's a very ambitious and it's a very sort of goosebumpy kind of thing which they're doing. And with the scale, they'll probably succeed also. And I think they are. So and that really puts into context the importance of all of this. So yes, you need the phygital, the virtual and the monument, and you need all of those. But if you are right now owner of a brand, I think you should own the destiny of the brand when it comes to its sales and its interactions in whatever form, direct to consumer or through a physical presence. And I think the big brands will move in that direction.
Well, that brings me to the next question, and Vikram, I want you to respond, which is, going forward, better work and especially, with startups and so on, doing a better job of the idea of serving unmet needs or latent needs of consumers, creating some kind of buzz around the launch or the product itself, and then hoping that the success of the product in meeting the needs is the way forward in brand building going forward.
So, sorry,
today we find a lot of the D2C brands actually creating a 200, 300, 400, 500 crore business without even resorting to the classical positioning, the classical advertising, creating, and so on. And the way they do it is that their offering is very well defined, and hence it serves some unmet need. They create a lot of buzz. It could be tweets, it could be mastheads, it could be some Insta posts, or even some events or PR and so on and so forth. And then they're able to get footfalls, and they're able to get leads. And then lo and behold, before you know, they're already a 400 crore brand, and they've not even made it an advertising creative or even written a positioning statement. Do you think this is going to be the way forward?
My take on that is, look, you'll always need a basic brand proposition that you need to articulate in whatever form. You will need it. The reason why a lot of the startups are going this way, I think I mentioned it a little earlier, there's always some amount of people out there who are showing both interest and intent. So they're going to those wellness, for wellness brand, they're going to wellness websites, they're trying to find out more about good eating, they're exercising, whatever, they're going to all those places. So if you put your message out there, it's a relevant one, they're in the market for it, so they click and they get there. Similarly, there's those people who are showing intent, which is even more, they're going and actually searching for it. So obviously you need to be present and you convert those. So I think that's low-hanging fruit and that should be tapped. But even then you do need a proposition. But as you move further and you've mopped up this low-hanging fruit, as you want to get your franchise to grow, you will need to maybe resort to classical advertising techniques and go for mass media as well. But underlying all of this, I think Meghnad's also said it a number of times, just get your proposition right. What's the insight? What's the benefit? What's the brand all about? And I think that part you can't get away from that.
Okay, I come pretty much to my last question, and this is a question I'm going to ask all the three of you. Maybe let's just start with Josie. In today's era, or today's day and age, where there's digital marketing which is coexisting with traditional way of marketing, how would you define the success of an advertising campaign?
Only based on digital marketing or in general?
No, I'm saying in today's world where digital marketing also exists or coexists, in your as a creative person or as a head of a campaign, head of an agency, how would you define the success of an advertising campaign? Be it digital or physical, as the case may be. We do know how it is in a traditional way, but how would you define it in today's day and age?
I think from a creative perspective, I would still say it is the conversation that it creates. Because I believe that your work must create volunteers, and that the volunteers are the bigger medium than the media you use. So we're always trying to find ways to create volunteers who sort of hand raise and talk about your brand or about what you stand for. And I think that is the amplification that we seek. So I look for conversations, to be honest, because that's everything. That's like the stock market.
Meghna?
So I think I'll take it one step more on that, which is I'd love to see signals that people are interested based on the communication I've put out. Yeah. But the thing is, they may get there and then not like what they see from the brand or not show any sign of wanting to buy. So I think for me, it's important that the signals towards wanting to buy your brand should also be there. It may be direct sales and revenue itself. It could be as sharp a metric like that, but not only that. Yeah, it's not only that. It could be things like installs, things like the amount of time that they spend on your website or app and things of that sort. Yeah. So you want to look at stuff saying, you know what, it was eye-catching communication. They came and engaged with me, but they're giving me signs that they are going to come back and buy me.
Vikram?
I think it's all of what has been said earlier, but I'd like to have clarity on what is the outcome that we are seeking in every campaign. Some people might come back and say that I just want awareness. People are not aware of my brand. I want people to be aware of my brand. So salience and just, like the first time when, for example, when Hutch became Vodafone, it was just a name change in one way, but you just had to just make sure that everybody knows that the name is changed. So if it's awareness of a name change, if I know that, then it's all about maybe the awareness of the campaign is something that I'm going to track. And then there are various ways of trying to find that out. In some cases, it may be comprehension of a pretty complex proposition I'm making. The tough ones, I think, are the ones where you're looking at habit change or change of attitudes. Like I think whatever, like when in the Share the Load, the Josie's epic piece on changing attitudes, I think absolutely hearing conversations, social conversations should be the outcome metric that you're actually going by. So the conversation that a number of them, of course, the easiest ones are the ones where people want like performance, like app downloads, website visits, sales. Those are the ones that you can actually go and measure even more easily. I'm finding increasingly when we are going to clients, a good conversation, and it just starts purely in simple common sense English. What is it that you want to really achieve? What's your desired consumer response at the end of this campaign? If they're able to articulate that, chances are in today's ecosystem, you can find an outcome variable.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we have, I'm bang on time. There are a few questions which has been put up. So I will read out those questions. Some are very targeted to specific individuals, but some are general. But let me just start with the first one. Josie, this is for you. The question is as follows. This is from Chetan Fernandez. Would you agree with the submission that in the golden age of advertising, a good idea was necessarily a good TVC idea? Not necessarily media agnostic. However, in today's context, the creative idea needs to be effectively scalable across media. Could you elaborate a bit on the signpost for a effective creative process?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's like a whole study on this, but let me try and say it in a few words. And I'm not saying I'm the master of any of these things. Yeah, I'm just going to try. So the way I looked at it is, if you're looking at an integrated campaign that is going to touch all mediums and all touch points, then your central thought has to be an action. If your central thought is an intellectual sort of statement, then it's not going to travel. It won't have legs. But if the central thought is an action, then it can travel anywhere in any medium. So say, for example, with Mirinda, we did a campaign called Release the Pressure. Now, when you do something like that, where you feel there is an action involved, or even Share the Load, or Touch the Pickle, or Women Against Lazy Stubble, or Stand by Tough Moms, these are some of the campaigns where we sought action. And when we seek action, we find there are people who come forward and say, we want to take the action forward. So it's not that we end up writing everything. The integrated medium becomes bigger and bigger, and more touch points are created when there is a clear action, which is why we say create acts, not ads. Sorry, it wasn't meant to be a commercial plug here, but.
Thank you. Well, my next question is, Vikram, for you. This is talking of outcomes and measurements. There seems to be no universal metric across various channels. Even walled garden has its own, and now TV in India is under cloud. How do you measure success objectively today that the creative work has done, and on which channel?
So firstly, look, there's a difference between outcome and output. So if you're talking, there's no one common reach frequency GRP method across TV and digital. That is still an output level. I think this conversation is a more evolved one about outcomes. Now, if you're talking about outcomes, why does there need to be only one universal metric? If I want to create more awareness, I think just make it as if, for example, I want to change attitudes of people towards periods, and it's Touch the Pickle is coming in, it's all about breaking taboo. So then in that case, that's put it that way, start from there and say, how are you going to tell me that we've been successful in breaking this taboo? So then maybe there you'll come back and say the outcome measurement that we need to do is social chatter and sentiment and all of those things. And fortunately now we can do all the social listening and we can do this. But my question back to Varun is, why do you really need one measurement? The important point is that, look, over time, we're going to evolve with a few, because, how do you know one is a successful versus the other? That's when you need benchmarks. So let's take about, there was a time when people are saying Facebook likes is a good outcome measure. Now, I think clearly people are finding that stickiness with content is showing some degree of engagement. So time spent on your content becomes, I think Facebook is also now propounding more of that. People who spent more time is a metric. Now, if that becomes one of the metrics, then benchmarks are important. So you might come back and say, on average, this was the kind of whatever, say people spent 5 minutes on it, and a particular piece of communication creative led it to people spending 8 minutes. So it's higher than that. So, benchmarks become important that way. Like likes, like even today with influencers, you're looking at number of followers and number of shares and number of engagement, and certain kind of benchmarks are emerging from those kind of things. So I think as we speak, there doesn't need to be one universal metric. Different outcomes are going to have different metrics. Chances are that for like engagement, whatever engagement means, you will have maybe 3 or 4 metrics that you'll finally which will become popular currency. And then within them, benchmarks will exist. But that's an evolving place.
Or as Josie said, your outcome is the act happening or not? So you create the act. If the acts are happening, you're good. What do you say, Josie?
Thank you.
Okay, the next one for you, Meghna. This is, in theory, with the increased capability of precision targeting, would clutter evaporate, and would customer X receive only those messages which are aligned with his or her preferences, profile, and interest? In other words, what he's saying is that with so much of data floating and so much of precision marketing happening, where is the clutter?
So the thing is that I don't think clutter is going to go away. And the reason is actually quite simple, which is multiple people are doing precision marketing on a different part of your life. So for example, I'm a mother of a kid. So a certain brand is going to target me for that. At the same time, I'm a consumer of, let's say, makeup products. A different brand is going to target me for that. I love travel. A third brand is going to target me for that. So all of us are multifaceted personalities, and end of the day, we will be exposed across different mediums. So I think clutter is not going away. So consumers will still get bombarded with a whole host of communication. But do we have tools which are allowing us to become more and more precise? And should we leverage them more? The answer is 100% yes. The second thing I also feel is, depending on the context, is it going to be more effective if you sharpen your creative to talk to that consumer in that mode or medium? There also is 100% yes. So for example, if a consumer goes and searches for, I'm wanting to find some music, for example, and then you show a KitKat ad saying, enjoying your music break, have a KitKat. But if I go and say, I want to go find a movie, then KitKat can say, you want to go watch a movie, have a movie break with KitKat. You know, that's the kind of things which will get enabled, make it contextual and hence more relevant. Because if KitKat talks to me in that moment, that stomach rumble moment happens, and I join the dots and I actually go take that action. So I think it's Ashok, a wonderful space of explosive creativity on how you bring different facets together and do micro or nano targeting almost.
Okay, the last question, which is there, this is to do with the whole social activism and controversy piece, where the panelist observation is sought on, is it a symptom of widespread cynicism towards the message medium and the messenger? Anyone wants to have a go at it? Oh my God. You should.
Josie, I'm nominating you.
You can't do that, please.
Vikram, I thought you will say yes and no.
No, Vikram said he'll take a position. Vikram, you have to take a position.
I actually think I'm actually a little irritated with the irrelevant social activism that goes on. These days, you can't get into a WhatsApp group with your old college buddies, work buddies, and some kind of stupid issue somebody is going to be, whether it's political, whether it is religious, whether it is whatever issues. So everybody is getting very strident. And this becomes worse in these WhatsApp groups are still personal groups here. When you go into this
Twitter kind of stuff.
Twitter and Facebook, you're just broadcasting with impunity. So I think somewhere, by all means, voice your opinion, and I'm all for that. But then you should voice your opinion responsibly. If you're doing it out there, face the consequences. If you've hurt some sentiment, or if you've actually said something which is downright, I mean, sort of bordering libel. So I would just say that this is using common sense and just proper manners and etiquette when you're out there in social media. Yeah, I just find social activism has become, as at least among some people, is just it's an opportunity to vent and you're venting with so-called impunity, which I have a problem with. So I don't think it's cynicism towards message, medium, and messenger. I think it's more the person's internal mindset, which is cynical, which is whatever they see, they just get into and they go have a rant about it. So I think it's more a problem with the population at large and society at large. I think that it's an ill that we have, a social ill. Sorry for going on a rant on this one.
But tell me, Josie, how do you see it? I mean, when your creative output actually gets into a controversy, or to use your language, gets into conversations, good or bad, and conversations can be right, wrong, good, bad, etc. I mean, do you welcome it? Do you get worried? How do you see it? Do you think, yes, it broken the clutter?
When I was in David, I apologized twice on national TV for 2 of the campaigns that I did, and that to 9 o'clock news. So I mean, and I've had my neighbors looking down on me saying, this guy, something's wrong with him. So, but you don't want controversy at all, not in today's world at all. When we did it in 2005 and all, it was fine. I think today you do want conversation, and you you're actually trying to kill cynicism. I want our creative work to create tremendous optimism. We want to create tremendous sort of feeling of positivity for things. And that's what we try to do. We're trying to be like children who feel that it can be better. So that way it's not provoking some sort of unnecessary controversy. It's provoking something that could be better. I remember this film we did for Visa, when I didn't even know about the meaning of financial inclusivity, and the CEO of Visa was telling us about it. So we did a film where we shot this guy in Kashmir before Kashmir opened, under tremendous security, and he's cycling and using his cycle as a cycle generator, so he can create more sort of energy in lighting in his village, which is a remote village, in a real village we went to. And it was saying that with Visa's card, you're not just buying stuff in malls. You can, through e-commerce, get what you want. And this guy was buying the equipment to convert his cycle into a cycle generator, so he could generate something for his village. And I got, I went to Gulzar Saab and said, I've written something in English, but your beauty and your purity will make it amazing. And he did an amazing writing on that. And for me, that was, hey, what if there was a world like this? So what we try to do is, what if there's a world like this? And advertising can do that. So we're trying to create a world where we want to live in. Now, if that creates conversation, that's great. We don't want controversy.
Ashok, I also think you have to link this back to, purpose now has become a very, very cool thing, right? Every brand wants to have its purpose and be aligned to some of these do good kind of events, right? I think it's very important that we are not seen as opportunistic, and just jumping onto something that's happening. If we are about women's empowerment, then stay that course and do everything related to women's empowerment, but don't jump the bandwagon and try this and that and the other, because you will just come across as very shallow, and the chances of you going down the controversy path are also greater, because you won't have the experience of what do people say, how do people react, what is the right way to say this, and it's all very sensitive. So again, first principle marketing of pick those pieces where you want to have a voice or purpose or being involved, etc., and then do those consistently. And for everything else, just stay one step back. It's okay.
Thank you so much, Meghna. And I think bang on. We are just on the last minute, so I want to wind up as promised. Josie, Vikram, and Meghna, thank you so much for not just your time, but also your very, very valuable and candid observations and comments. I think it was a very, very meaningful and lively discussion. I must say that, I've done 4 of this for IA, and this has had the maximum registrations. So that speaks volume of not just the subject matter, but also the people who are going to speak. So thank you so much for your time on behalf of IA and Inten. I thank you for all your inputs, comments, and candid conversations. Have a lovely evening.
Sure.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Vikram.
Bye, Vikram.
Bye, Meghna. Bye, Josie.
Bye.
Thanks, Ashok.
Bye.